Welcome to Innovate for Impact, an informative mini-series brought to you by Tania Gomez Consulting. In this series, we embark on a journey to explore the remarkable innovations that are shaping the landscape of the NDIS for a more inclusive future. Join us as we uncover inspiring stories of visionary individuals, organisations and technologies that are revolutionising the way we approach disabilities.
Today, I'm joined by Ross Paull, the founder of nTrustus. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Nice to be here with you.
So I'm really interested in learning more about the solution that you've created. To begin with, can you tell me about the work you've done with nTrustus?
Well, we received a grant from the NDIS Quality Safeguards Commission to build and develop a digital complaint solution for NDIS providers. So basically, we're taking providers from probably manual processes that they currently might have, and we've got a digital solution that actually helps the participant to make the complaint and also help the provider respond.
Wonderful. And what is your personal background in the disability sector? How did you come up with this solution?
Well, we actually began in the financial services sector. So ASIC had released some new compliance regulations around complaints handling. And as you know, it's a mature industry, heavy compliance obligations. So we built a tech platform to enable complaints to be resolved early and quickly. And that caught the attention of the NDIS Commission. And they asked us, is this something you can do for the disability sector? So in 2022, we did a pilot with the Commission and we configured the platform to suit the disability sector. And that's what led to the grant. Because the pilot, we realised, wow, there's some providers may need some help in putting in a complaints process that works. And so they gave us a grant to co-design and build a digital complaint solution.
Amazing. What is the problem that you're solving for the stakeholders in NDIS? So maybe we start with the NDIS providers themselves. How does this solution help them?
Well, at the moment, a lot of them are using manual processes, and some of the resourcing is based on an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. And they tell them this is how you create a complaints register. Very time consuming, and it's missing the engagement piece, where you're creating a register and a case, but you're not resolving the complaint. And so that's where we step in. We not only connect the participant with the provider, we also guide both. So we guide the participant on how to make a complaint, and that way, by the time it goes to the provider, they've got a very good understanding what's going on, and then we help the provider respond. Yeah. And so at the moment, they get told, well, they've got this manual. You know, there's a 4A framework on complaint handling, answer, action, acknowledge, apology. And they've got to read that manual, work out how to put that in practice in a repeatable way. A lot of hassle. We embed that into our process so that basically it's an experiential tool for them to use.
Wonderful. And you talked about the manual process. So when I'm working with providers or I'm auditing providers, they do all have the same complaints register that they use, and often they don't look back at that. They're not looking for things like data. They're not looking at is there the same participant that's involved in all these complaints? Is it the same support worker? Is there any trends and analytics that we can build from that? Do you do something around that so they can really have a look at not just tracking complaints and resolving them, but actually using this data to improve their service delivery?
That's one of the key problems we identified with our consultations with providers when we built the tool, was that multiple data collection points. Yeah. That's a real frustration for them. So what we've done is centralise everything into the single portal. So yes, all those metrics can all be collected and tracked.
Amazing. That would be great. What about participants? How does this benefit the participants, the person with disability that has the complaint?
Well, complaints are intimidating to make. It's awkward, and they worry that they might affect their services. Yeah. So for them, they kind of need help to actually write the complaint. Like, where do they start? It's often like a blank canvas. And so what we do is we guide them in writing the complaint, writing a good-looking submission that's got the best chance of being heard. And empowerment was a key objective of our grant, empowering participants to come forward and actually give them the voice to be able to go directly to the providers. And that's probably one of the key issues that we're solving for the Commission as well, because the Commission already has a complaints process
Yeah.
in place, but there's a logjam. And by the time complaints reach them, there's an enormous amount of frustration. And so what we're doing is helping self-resolve. We're empowering participants to actually put forward and make themselves heard. And we're empowering the provider to actually respond according to best practice. So we kind of show in using the tool what best practice looks like.
You mentioned there the pain point for the Commission. Why did the NDIS Commission decide to put a grant together for this? What was the pain point for them?
Well, a lot of complaints don't need to escalate. You know, we're talking about small things like billing discrepancies.
Right.
There might be communication problems with supports. They don't really require human intervention. And so our portal's perfect to resolve those low-level complaints, less serious matters. We're not for reportable incidents. There's obviously a whole heavy compliance framework around reportable incidents.
Yeah.
That said, our AI, which we've built in, and we'll talk about, picks up reportable incidents, but we tell the provider what their obligations are and they escalate that to the Commission. But certainly low-level complaints about your provider or your plan manager is suitable for the portal. So what we're doing is we're resolving complaints early, right, without the needless escalation to go to the Commission. That frees up their resources for more needier cases that do require intervention.
Amazing. So what's the impact if providers don't get participants to complain and give them compliments or complaints and for them not to have that data in their business?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if they don't get complaints or even positive feedback, they don't know where things are going wrong, right? They're not going to know there's trouble and they don't know what's happening. And so then that begs the question, what happens if they don't know there's trouble? It escalates. And so this is where small things can become bigger problems. You've got to nip things in the bud early. Complaints are always best resolved early in the piece. And so what happens when they escalate? Well, they go to the Commission and that leads to unhappy participants and it leads to bad reviews. And so early in our consultations, that's the other thing I should mention, that we not only do complaints, we actually collect positive feedback, compliments as well. And that was important for providers because there is a negative connotation when it comes to, complaints. We're actually collecting good news, the positive stories as well. And so we're bookending complaints, and so we're very much a feedback portal.
Yeah.
And that comes down to data. But not when it escalates needlessly, you just don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So a lot of providers actually want to get complaints because they want to know when things are going wrong. And we do get that sort of feedback that I don't get many complaints, so I don't need this, right?
Yeah.
The fact is you've got to be on the front foot.
Yeah.
This is a proactive tool. There's no need to be reactive when it comes to complaints. And I think there's a great saying that those who have nothing to hide, hide nothing. So if you actually are open to receiving feedback, you're sending out a positive message to your participants that you're open to hear from them.
Yeah, absolutely. I could probably count, I would say probably 80% of the providers that I audit don't have anything in their complaint register. And when I dig into that a little bit more, the standard actually doesn't say complaints, it says feedback and complaint management, right? So feedback is equally as important.
Yeah.
And especially in a brand new business, you get feedback every day in every interaction with all your interactions with your participants. And providers are really good at actioning that feedback and improving their business, but they're not capturing that. They're not capturing that, one participant said that they wanted their service agreement done via email as opposed to in person, or whatever the feedback has been. They're not capturing that. And then at their audit, they actually don't have as much information around how they've made all these improvements. So their continuous improvement register is also empty. Their complaint and feedback register is empty. And it actually makes the auditor kind of question, well, if you've been running for 3 years and you have not one piece of feedback, you're obviously not asking the right questions.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I mentioned we started from financial services. And the way ASIC views a complaint is an expression of dissatisfaction.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have to be in writing.
Yeah.
Right? And to be compliant under their regulatory regime, you've actually, if you go to them with a register with nil complaints, you're not complying.
Yeah.
They expect to see the data. because by definition of what it is, expression of satisfaction, it means you're not actually capturing it and you're not actually acknowledging it. And so different levels of compliance, and I think financial services is used to that, heavy compliance. But so for the NDIS, I think it's a great opportunity to actually step up, get that feedback, and acknowledge where improvements can be made. And a key part for providers is also continuous improvement.
Yes.
And being open to new ways to improve.
Yeah, and I think it's such a competitive marketplace for NDIS providers that if you aren't getting feedback and almost co-designing your business with the participants you serve, they will leave you for someone else. So there's actually a really big business argument here that says that if you aren't getting any feedback from your participants, your retention is going to be poor. Your participants aren't going to stay with you for long because they're going to find someone that's more proactive, that's asking them that what they want and actually delivering what they want based on their feedback.
Well, that's another pain point for providers, that the onboarding. So having to onboard new participants as well. So keeping your participants is a good thing.
Yeah.
It saves on onboarding costs.
Yeah. And from a provider's perspective, you're playing in a very competitive but a price fixed market. You can't just undercut your competition because we're all paying the same SHADS award. We have the same margins we're playing with. You can't simply produce a less superior product at a lower price point. You actually have to have your products and services to be as good or better than someone else's to keep that participant. It is a demand-driven system. The participant can take their funding anywhere else at any point in time.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned about the data capture as well. So collecting more positive feedback, the more data points you have, the more quality the reviews are.
Yeah.
So the more you get, the better it is. And I think that a lot of the unregistered providers are sole traders.
Yes.
So it's important that they stand out from the crowd. So this is where we play in. This is where we can actually help providers stand out from the crowd.
Now, I understand as part of your consultation period process, you spoke to quite a lot of providers. What were their frustrations, their wants, their fears, their desires? What did you learn about them during that process?
Yeah, we did. And I've got some interesting... So we actually commissioned outside group Disability Services Consulting to help us with that, our consultations. Very interesting. So some of the stuff that we found was that in terms of frustrations, a lot of them are exhausted, they're time poor, and a lot of these compliance, they really haven't got the time to, and they're not used to compliance environments, unlike financial services. And so for them, it's trying to keep up with participants' expectations and also doing this compliance stuff. So inevitably, a lot of things slip between the cracks. So the time it takes as well, like I've had a lot of feedback about how a lot of the bigger providers end up over-servicing small complaints, chews up a lot of time, and that duplication of data entry, that was another key concern and frustration. And in terms of wants, we actually heard they want to hear back from participants. Participant, please complain, help us improve our service to you, was some of the one of the feedback we got. We would rather be kept informed, so have the opportunity to action address it rather than allow it to continue. Also, tracking and reporting is a big one. Keeping everything in the one spot, having a single source of truth. You can imagine the hassle in trying to track down email threads, who said what. So keeping everything and documenting in the one spot is important. And also user-friendly. So often participants are often more comfortable doing things online because they might be worried about someone having a bad day. And that was some feedback that we got as well, that for participants, for them to come forward, it's difficult because they're worried that they're not going to get heard and it's going to be lost in the ether. A lot of providers we heard do want to meet the expectations of participants in that way. And some of the fears, I worry that the required information is not readily accessible to me and the complaint may be a larger issue that hasn't been identified. That's always a worry. And just meeting compliance is always an issue. And then desires, so that was a big one. They want transparency, streamlined, interactive, which is where we step in. So we're not only doing the sort of case management, we're actually engaging, allowing them to engage together. And then that centralised, being centralised, having a centralised portal, that's a big one.
Wow, that sounds like you got a lot of information there. How does nTrustus then simplify compliance and support providers in that role?
Well, it's really in the automation. So basically, everything's tracked. It produces a report at the end. So once the participant and the provider have reached an agreement, a shared and agreed solution, all that's tracked. Press a button and there's a report that's printed for both, which is actionable. And if they don't solve the complaint, it's no biggie. It can still be escalated to the Commission, but at least they've had a chance to try and resolve it early before it needs to go to that stage. But if it does escalate, then they've got a record of what's gone on and what's happened.
Yeah, wonderful. So you talked a little bit about AI. How do you use AI in your workflows?
So we started the grant project in mid-23, and ChatGPT had only been widely available for about 5 months. So very early on in the piece, we engaged with the University of Technology in Sydney, their data science institutes, their boffins. And we sort of said, well, how can we introduce AI into our workflow? And so we started collaborating with them, and we had a couple of requirements on the AI. We had to do it in a way that is enabling and assistive, so it's not making decisions for anyone. We wanted to do it for both participants and providers because we're a two-sided platform. So we wanted to help both. And so we also had to have it so that the providers always remain in control of their decision. They've always got to have agency. So what we did was first off for the providers, we created a My Response Assistant where a complaint comes in, the provider will write their first response, and the AI looks at the manual, the 4A framework, compares the complaint dynamically, compares his response, and we mark them on how they've gone and how they can improve the response. So it's very experiential and interactive. And so the provider can then write a best practice response. And on the other side, with participants, English may be a second language. They may have trouble with awkward language, don't know where to start. The AI will take a complaint. So we ask them a couple of questions, and the AI helps them write a really good, clear, concise complaint. It's optional, and they can still put it in their own words, and we'll still prepare a summary. But helping them prepare the complaint means that by the time it lands to the provider, they've got a good, clear understanding what's going on, and they can get to the bottom of things very, very quickly. So that, giving the parties the confidence that for the participant, they know that they're going to guarantee they're getting a good response because we're coaching the provider. And the provider's learning, there's different staff members may come in and they're learning what good looks like in responding.
Wonderful. So you're kind of prompting and guiding them through the process step by step to get them to draw out what's important, make sure it meets the standards, and make sure that it's concise and easy to action.
Yeah, and it automatically classifies the complaint, so it picks up and everything. So by the time it lands in the provider's dashboard, it's got a complete, concise summary of what's gone on. It picks up reportable incidents, and that's often a subjective consideration for a lot of bigger providers as well. It picks it up and it flags it to the provider that this is possibly a reportable incident. It's up to you to decide and determine it. Here are your escalation obligations to the Commission. We inform them of all that. So it picks up the reportable instances as well.
Wonderful. So we talked a little bit about AI and workflows and automations. It seems like you're definitely there on the cutting edge of some of these tools. What do you think, or where do you see technology in the role of compliance into the future?
Well, the NDIS registration task force came up with a recommendation for tiered registration. So there's 150,000 unregistered providers are going to have to become registered. No matter what tier, whether you're doing advanced care or basic care, you might be providing guarding services, they've recommended that you have a complaints process and a process for incident reporting. So I think that smaller providers often don't know where to start. How do I do a complaints process? Where do I begin? And so what we can do is we can tick that box for them on that registration, on that compliance. And the more widespread that a tool like ours is used, the more consistent the approach is going to be in NDIS complaints handling. So I think it's got a huge role because it enables a lot of those unregistered providers to become registered. It's a key requirement because the Commission wants visibility. And so I think really important part, particularly when often they don't know where to start when it comes to these types of things.
Wonderful. So if there was a provider who's interested in getting started, what's the process?
Our onboarding process is super simple. It's a free trial for providers and it's always free for participants. And that was a key part of our grant, was that it had to be free for participants because we want to encourage the feedback from them to come forward. And so providers will give a free trial, and our plans start at like $20 a month, one low monthly subscription for the smaller size providers, cup of coffee per week, and you can have best practice compliance.
Well, that sounds really wonderful. I'm really looking forward to having a look at the nTrustus system and finding out more.
Thank you. It's been great talking to you today.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for joining us on another enlightening episode of Innovate for Impact. Stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations and innovative ideas that drive positive change within the NDIS space. Remember, together we're shaping a future where innovation and impact go hand in hand.